Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. At 4:17 a.m., the alarm screamed. A black Jeep, a fake HOA badge, and a letter zip-tied to the gate marked the beginning of a nightmare. They said my land was reserved for a retreat. What followed was fraud, invasion, and the fight of my life. I woke up to the sound of metal snapping. The alarm system tripped at exactly 4:17 in the morning, not a second earlier. My phone vibrated against the wood nightstand, pulling me from one of the deepest sleeps I'd had in months. I blinked, half-dazed, as the floodlight cam popped up automatically on the screen. Motion detected at the gate. I rubbed my face and squinted through the feed. There it was, a black Jeep Wrangler, angled just slightly off the gravel trail, sitting smugly in front of my front gate. A crisp, clean HOA emblem was stuck to the side panel. Not painted, magnetized. Like a knockoff badge of authority slapped on by a middle manager at a failing timeshare company. I sat up, instinct clicking in faster than coffee ever could. I tapped for the second camera angle. Fence post view. Sure enough, someone had wedged a laminated plastic folder through the gate with a bright orange zip tie. I zoomed in. My name was on the envelope. Silas Morgan. For immediate attention, I pulled on a thermal shirt, grabbed the flashlight, and headed outside into the freezing Colorado air. The wind smelled like cedar and snow. Crunching down the frost-covered path, I made it to the gate and ripped the folder free. I flipped open the cover, already bracing myself. Inside was a professionally printed letter on letterhead, reading Aspen Trail Heights HOA. Just looking at it made my stomach tighten. It read, "Dear Mr. Morgan, this notice is to confirm that your location has been successfully reserved for an HOA-sponsored retreat. 70 guests are expected to arrive within 48 hours for a weekend of community building, hiking, and professional development. Please ensure all gates are unlocked and access is unobstructed. This reservation has been approved by the Regional Land Coordination Board. We thank you for your cooperation. Warmly, Karen Blauer, President, Aspen Trail Heights HOA." At the bottom was a QR code with a website link labeled Event Details and Layout Map. I scanned it. It led to a landing page with a logo I'd never seen before, landusecord.gov. Clearly a fake government URL. Half the links were broken. The rest were stock images of pine trees and smiling white people in hiking boots. I stared at the gate for a while in the dim blue glow of my phone, my breath curling in the cold. Then I went back inside and made coffee. By 6:15, an email hit my inbox titled Aspen Trail Spring Retreat, Logistics Packet, Confirmed Site, Morgan Cabin. Attached was a multi-page PDF, complete with parking assignments, meal schedules, and tentative bonfire site number 2, marked 50 yards from my solar generator. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't on social media. No HOA memberships. No contact with anyone from Aspen Trail Heights, which was a 20-mile downhill drive into a development I avoided like the plague. I clicked reply and typed 3 words, "Wrong damn property." Before I could hit send, my phone rang. Unknown number, Colorado area code. I picked up. "Mr. Morgan," came the voice, smooth and self-assured. "Karen Blauer here. We're just following up on the reservation confirmation. Our advance crew will be on site by tomorrow at 8 to begin prep." I blinked. "Ma'am, I think there's a serious misunderstanding. This is private land. I'm not part of your HOA. I've never signed anything, and no one has permission to be here." "Oh, we're very aware," she said lightly. "Your parcel is currently classified as passive use under the Colorado Multi-Use Zoning Update of last April. HOA designated communal access can be provisionally assigned to any passive use lots adjacent to the trailway corridor. It's standard." "That's not a thing," I said flatly. "Oh, it is now," she replied, as if that settled it. "You should have received our informational newsletter back in December. We delivered it via ground service. Even if you mailed it to a yak, it wouldn't make this legal." "Mr. Morgan," she said, tone hardening slightly, "you're not being very neighborly. The HOA has invested considerable time and money into organizing this event. You may not realize it, but this location was designated in a subcommittee meeting with 2/3 board support and acknowledgement from a regional land advisor. If you interfere, you may be subject to litigation for obstruction of communal use rights." "You ever hear of trespassing, Karen?" I said, now standing in my hallway with my boots on, staring at the safe. There was a pause. "We'll be arriving regardless," she said sweetly. "It would be best if you weren't difficult. This is for the community." She hung up. I stared at the phone, then at the blank wall beside it. A surge of something familiar. Maybe the same instinct I had when I used to track cyber intrusions through federal networks kicked in. Cold, sharp, patient. I sat down, opened my laptop, pulled up the county land records, and started digging. Because if they were planning to move on my land, then I wasn't going to wait inside and hope they changed their minds. Not a chance. By 8:30 the next morning, I was sitting at my workbench in the shed with a cup of reheated coffee and a live feed from every angle of the property flickering across 4 separate screens. I'd already pulled copies of every land use amendment filed in the past 3 years. There was nothing in them about passive use, zoning overrides, or trailway corridors. Karen had made it all up, or, more likely, twisted a minor regulation into something it was never intended to be. At 8:57, the first truck appeared. It came up the road slow and heavy, engine straining against the incline, a dusty gray box truck with the same HOA emblem magnetized on the doors. The sides read Aspen Trail Heights, Community Logistics, like someone tried to make it sound both official and vaguely charitable. Behind it came a white van full of what looked like folding chairs. They didn't stop at the gate. Instead, 2 guys in matching polos hopped out and walked directly up to the fence like they owned it. One of them rattled the lock. The other held a clipboard and started yelling toward the camera. "Mr. Morgan, we're with the HOA logistics team. We're here to begin setting up for tomorrow's event." I flipped on the loudspeaker. "This is private land. You're trespassing. Step back from the gate." Clipboard guy hesitated, then chuckled nervously. "Oh, we've got pre-clearance, sir. HOA authorization signed and sealed. We just need to get the staging area arranged, then we'll be out of your way. Easy stuff." He stepped back, nodded to his partner, and the 2 of them started unloading the truck through the fence. A plastic table slid between the bars, then a cooler, then a propane tank. I was out the door in under 30 seconds. By the time I reached the gate, 3 more men had joined them and were halfway through lifting a 10 by 20 canvas tent onto a hand truck. All 5 froze when I stepped into view, shotgun slung over one shoulder, the barrel pointed down but the tension obvious. "You've got 10 seconds to clear that gear off my fence and get the hell off my land," I said calmly. "I'm not asking again." There was a long pause. One of the men glanced at another. The guy with the clipboard swallowed hard and took a half step back. Then, from behind the truck, a 6th person walked up, short, buzz-cut, sunglasses, and a radio clipped to his belt. He looked like someone who failed the park ranger exam 3 times and decided to go private. His shirt had a sewn-on badge that read HOA Site Security. "You threatening us with a weapon, sir?" he asked, arms folded. "Number?" "I'm telling you to leave private property where you were never invited, where you're currently trespassing, and where I've already documented your entry on camera." "This is a designated community engagement site," he said flatly. "We've got authorization." "Then you'll have no problem explaining that to the sheriff," I said, pulling out my phone and dialing the non-emergency line. "Stay where you are. Let's all enjoy the paperwork together." They froze again. The tension turned oily in the air. 15 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV crawled up the ridge. I recognized Deputy Wayne Haskins behind the wheel, same guy who helped me file property lines when I bought the place. His eyes widened as he took in the tables, gear, and 6 HOA staff standing nervously by their trucks. He stepped out, thumb hooked through his belt. "Mornin', Silas." "What's all this?" Karen's HOA seems to think they reserved my house like it's a weekend Airbnb. Clipboard guy perked up. "Sir, we were told this property was designated for temporary shared use by the HOA. We're not here to cause trouble." Wayne raised an eyebrow. "Let me see the paperwork." They handed him a copy. He looked it over, flipped a few pages, then frowned. "Where's the county seal? These aren't official filings. This isn't even a legal format for land use notifications." Buzzcut stepped forward again. "We were told this was approved through the Land Coordination Council." "There is no such council," Wayne said flatly. "This document is not binding. This land is not under HOA jurisdiction. Silas owns this property free and clear. You're trespassing." He turned to me. "You want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. "But if they come back with a hammer and start planting signs, we'll talk." Wayne gave them a long look. "Load it back up, all of it. You've got 20 minutes. There was a long silence. Then the men moved. As they started shoving tables and coolers back into the truck, Wayne turned to me. You might want to call your lawyer. I got a heads up yesterday that someone from Aspen Trail requested parcel reassignment data from the recorder's office. Might be nothing, might not. Yeah, I said, jaw tightening. I'll get on that. As the last cooler thudded back into the truck bed and the so-called logistics team rolled out, I stood there at the gate, watching the dust trail fade into the trees. They weren't done. They were just getting started. By the time the dust from their tires settled, I was already halfway through a call to my lawyer, Meredith Clark. She was the kind of woman who drank her coffee black and her depositions hot, and she'd been my legal shield since the day I closed on the land. When I explained what just happened, she didn't miss a beat. Silas, send me everything. Video, letter, screenshots, that fake HOA schedule. I'll call the county recorder's office and find out what the hell they're trying to pull. By noon, I was back in the shed, uploading footage from my exterior cams while Meredith worked her way through the bureaucratic maze downtown. I didn't expect anything to move fast, but by 2:30 she called back, and she sounded pissed. I just pulled a parcel history report, she said. 4 days ago, a zoning adjustment was submitted to the county listing a portion of your land, about 4 acres on the southern ridge, as a provisional community use zone. I blinked. That's impossible. I didn't sign anything, and there's no clause in my deed allowing that kind of override. It gets better, she continued, voice edged with venom. The submission was filed under your parcel number, but signed with the name of Gerald Whitaker. Gerald Whitaker, the man I'd bought the land from 6 years ago, who had, last I checked, been buried in a veterans cemetery outside Colorado Springs. They forged a dead man's signature, I muttered. Not just that. The document included a backdated letter of intent, supposedly co-signed by Whitaker and the HOA's planning board from back in 2018. It was filed through a proxy, not online, but hand-submitted to the recorder's office. And they accepted it? They stamped it and scanned it into the public record, she said. The clerk who handled it, Guy Rawlins, claims everything looked in order. I've requested the physical document. You're going to want to see it with your own eyes. The words hit like ice water. A fake reservation was one thing. A falsified county record, that was another level entirely. They were trying to manufacture a paper trail to make their invasion look legitimate, and someone inside the system, either careless or corrupt, was letting it happen. I'm coming down there, I said. Now. I loaded the truck and started the winding descent toward the county office. 30 minutes of driving through sharp switchbacks and pine-shadowed roads, trying not to grind my teeth into powder. When I arrived, Meredith was waiting on the front steps with a manila folder in her hands and a grim expression on her face. Here, she said, handing it to me, fresh from the archive. Inside was a printed copy of the land adjustment form. The name Gerald Whitaker was typed in perfect alignment, followed by a signature that looked like it was traced off a DMV form. Next to it, a printed name, Karen Blower, Community Development Chair. At the bottom, a timestamp dated April 22nd. No witness signature, no notary, and yet it had been scanned and accepted. This thing wouldn't pass a high school civics class, I muttered. I've already filed a fraud report with the district attorney's office, Meredith said, but county bureaucracies move like molasses. They'll investigate. Eventually. In the meantime, the HOA will act like they have a valid claim. Because it's in the record, I said bitterly, and they'll cite it at every turn until someone officially calls it fake. That's the plan, she confirmed. We need to go on offense. I want your original deed, the sale documents, and the boundary survey. I'm going to draft a cease and desist and deliver it to the HOA's board in person. As she pulled out her phone to call the board's attorney, I sat on the courthouse steps and looked out over the parking lot. The sky was darkening. Somewhere up the ridge, my generator was still off, my gate still scarred from the intrusion, and my name, my land, was now being dragged through county records as a community free-for-all. Karen wasn't bluffing. She wasn't just pushing. She was engineering the kind of fiction that, if left unchecked, became reality on paper, and she wasn't done yet. Back at the cabin that evening, I checked the trail cams. Just after sunset, a man in a maintenance vest had walked the fence line with a flashlight, pausing every so often to take photos of the no trespassing signs. He didn't touch the gate. He didn't try anything bold, but he was scouting. The next morning started quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence you only get in the mountains after a storm, but I knew better than to trust it. The generator was still off, running diagnostics after someone tried messing with it. I'd spent the night with my backup battery rig powering the cameras and rechecking every motion sensor in the perimeter. At 6:23, I got the alert. Motion detected, South Ridge Access Trail. I flicked on the monitor and almost choked on my coffee. The camera feed showed a convoy, not trucks, not SUVs, buses. 6 full-sized charter buses crawling up the narrow, rocky service road like they were on a damn wine tour. Behind them were box vans, SUVs with catering magnets, and a U-Haul hitched to a portable toilet trailer. The lead bus had a vinyl sign across the side that read Aspen Trail Heights Annual Retreat in cheery, looping script. They weren't bluffing. They were invading. I grabbed my phone and called Meredith. "They're here," I said. "All of them." She didn't ask who. "Don't engage," she snapped. "Call the marshals. You've got enough grounds for a federal escalation with that falsified registry." "I already sent the documents last night. They're reviewing it." "But even if they send someone, they won't get here in time." "Then don't get arrested," she warned. "Let the system do its work." I hung up and threw on my coat. When I stepped outside, I could already hear it. Car doors slamming, people laughing, someone dragging a dolly across gravel. I crept up to the ridgeline, careful to stay hidden among the trees, and watched the chaos unfold. There were dozens of them, people in matching windbreakers with HOA logos, organizers with clipboards, cooks setting up portable grills under pop-up tents, kids running around. A woman with a megaphone was directing volunteers to zone the entertainment sector next to my woodpile. And then, to top it off, I saw 2 men approach my house. One of them held a key ring. The other had a tool bag. They fiddled with the lock. Couldn't get it open. So they unscrewed the strike plate, propped the door with a crowbar, and disappeared inside like it was their summer cabin. I felt something cold settle in my chest. A few minutes later, a third person entered the house. Clipboard woman. She pulled open the drapes and gestured toward the rooms like a real estate agent giving a tour. The camera inside the living room picked up muffled voices. "Let's open the windows. We don't want it to smell musty." Karen said they'd want natural light. I reached for my phone again and called the one number I knew would actually care, Deputy Wayne Haskins. He answered on the second ring. "I hope you're calling to tell me this is all a weird misunderstanding," he said. "They broke into my home," I growled. "There are 6 buses, 100 people, and they just walked into my house like it's a goddamn ski lodge." "Stay on the line," Wayne said immediately. "I'm 10 minutes out. I'll bring backup." I didn't wait. I set the drone up, quiet, fast, and fully charged. It zipped above the tree line and started recording. From above, the scene looked like a county fair. Shiny buffet trays, portable stages, someone in a bear costume waving at children. I sent the live feed to Meredith, the sheriff's office, and, on a whim, the local news station, just in case. By the time Wayne arrived, flanked by 2 more deputies, I was already back near the trailhead, waiting in full view, arms crossed. The moment the law showed up, the party mood shifted. People started whispering. A few volunteers scattered. One of the so-called logistics crew tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that Karen had full permissions, and that the cabin was registered for use. Wayne didn't even answer. He marched straight to the front porch, looked at the busted door frame, then turned to me. "You want to press charges now?" I didn't hesitate. "Hell yes." He radioed it in. More units were dispatched. When Karen finally arrived, riding in the back seat of one of the SUVs like a visiting dignitary, she stepped out and froze when she saw me standing next to the sheriff. "Mr. Morgan," she said with a tight smile, "you weren't expected until later. But I'm glad you're here. We've got a few layout questions before the guests." "You broke into my house." She waved a hand. No. We merely accessed a provisionally reserved structure under shared access protocol." Wayne cut her off. "Karen Blauer, I need you to remain here. We have confirmation of forced entry and falsified registry records submitted to the county under a deceased name." Her face drained of color. I have documents, official approvals." "Which we'll review," he said, "with the DA." I watched her sputter and clench her jaw as the deputies began instructing the crowd to vacate the premises. A few guests protested. One man asked if he could at least finish his mimosa. The mascot bear tried to wave off a deputy and got gently tackled. By nightfall, the buses were gone. The food stations were empty. My door was broken, the generator wires were slashed, and someone had been in my safe. I stood in my living room, drone still buzzing in hover mode, while a deputy cataloged the items missing. They hadn't just trespassed. They'd stolen. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like someone coming back through the trees. I'd barricaded the busted door with a steel brace and wedged a chair under the handle like I was back in a roadside motel. The sheriff's team had taken statements, bagged prints, and promised to escalate it to the county DA, but I didn't trust promises. Not when my home had just hosted 100 entitled trespassers and at least one thief. By sunrise, I was on the phone with the federal marshal's office in Denver. Meredith had already submitted the fraud packet the day before. The falsified deed, the forged signature, the manipulated registry, and the combination of interstate filings, forged government records, and a massive coordinated trespass had finally caught someone's attention. The marshals assigned 2 field agents to investigate HOA-related real estate fraud in the area. They told me to expect a visit before the weekend. They didn't lie. By 10:30, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled up my trail. I watched from the porch as 2 men in windbreakers with U.S. Marshals stitched above their breast pockets stepped out. They introduced themselves, Agent Dawson and Agent Moreno, and immediately requested access to my surveillance server. We sat at my workbench, surrounded by coffee mugs, power cables, and 6 hard drives worth of evidence. I showed them the drone footage, the cam feeds from the kitchen when the event staff opened drawers like they were choosing Airbnb wine glasses, and the moment one of them disabled the generator and pulled down my solar grid alert signs. Agent Dawson looked grim. This isn't just trespassing. This is organized property seizure under the guise of authority. They broke into your home, disabled infrastructure, and tampered with security systems. You said the HOA used forged documents? I handed him the manila envelope from Meredith. They forged the signature of a dead man to claim part of my land, then submitted it through a proxy to the county. Someone inside the recorder's office signed off on it. Do you have a name? Guy Rawlins, county records clerk. Moreno was already on his phone checking the internal personnel registry. By noon, the marshals were gone, heading straight to the county building to pull full transaction logs and request a warrant for the original submission paperwork. Meanwhile, Meredith sent me a scanned affidavit from the Whitaker family, confirming that no such agreement ever existed and that the signature on the HOA submission was clearly not Gerald's. Then, just after 3 in the afternoon, I got the alert. I didn't expect so soon. Motion detected, front gate, officer presence. I flipped to the camera and saw them, 2 sheriff SUVs, lights spinning low and slow, plus the marshal's SUV right behind them. A small group had gathered near the fence, most in HOA polos and fleece vests. In the middle stood Karen Blower. She wasn't smiling this time. When I walked down the path and approached the gate, Wayne met me first. He looked serious but calm. "We've verified the fraud," he said. The marshals confirmed that the registry documents were submitted using a falsified, backdated authorization and a forged signature. County cameras caught the drop-off. The man who submitted them was a contractor employed by HOA Legal. Karen must have realized what was happening because she stepped forward, voice shrill but rehearsed. "This is outrageous. I have the original authorization from the board, and all of this was planned in good faith with the community in mind. My legal counsel is Ms. Blower," Agent Dawson interrupted, stepping forward and holding up a folded warrant. "You are being placed under arrest for filing fraudulent documents, conspiracy to commit property fraud, criminal trespass, unlawful entry, and obstruction of—" Justice Karen froze. Then, slowly, she started shaking her head. Number, I'm not going anywhere. I have authority. I was elected. This is my job. That property is—" Moreno cut her off. "You're not going anywhere except into custody. Please turn around." She didn't move. Wayne took a step forward, reached gently for her wrist, and Karen finally snapped. "Do you know who I am?" she shrieked. "I have approvals. I have the right. I was doing this for the community." She flailed, resisted, and then crumpled when the cuffs clicked shut. As the marshals began reading her rights, the other HOA members backed away, stunned. A few held clipboards. One woman in a logoed fleece took off her badge and stuffed it in her purse like she could erase the uniform. The marshals opened the rear door of the SUV and guided Karen in. She was still ranting as they closed it behind her. "I'm not done. You can't just— he doesn't even believe in governance." The SUV drove off in silence. I stood by the gate, arms folded, watching the last of the HOA staff shuffle away. One of the security goons tried to slip off into the trees, but a deputy caught him halfway to the ridge trail. They found 2 drone batteries and a pair of bolt cutters in his backpack. Inside the cabin, it was a mess. The drawers had been rifled through, the safe door hung open, the keypad wires sliced. My old watch was gone, a tablet, my weatherproof satellite modem stolen. They even took 2 tins of my emergency coffee rations. But I wasn't angry. I was surgical. I documented everything. I made backups. I sent it all to Meredith, who had already drafted the civil suit by sundown. The guests had seen it all. Some had filmed it. The arrest, the confrontation, the chaos. By morning, the story was on the front page of the local news site. HOA president arrested in mountain land fraud scandal. Federal charges filed. I printed a copy, folded it neatly, and pinned it to the new gate lock with a paperclip. Welcome to the mountains. The next morning started with a knock on my door. It was Deputy Wayne again, this time carrying a sealed envelope and a grim look. "You've been served," he said, handing it over. I tore it open and scanned the contents. A temporary injunction filed by a law firm representing the HOA board, apparently still functioning despite Karen's arrest. They were claiming that 4 acres of my land had been pre-reserved for public utility and were demanding a court hearing to enforce temporary access rights until the dispute was resolved. I laughed out loud. They're doubling down. Wayne didn't smile. It was filed through the county clerk's office. That means someone there's still playing ball with them. I called Meredith immediately. She was already ahead of me. "Check your email," she said. "We found something." It was a scan of the county land use registry logs. In April, Karen had filed 2 forms, one for a temporary reservation under communal green usage, which required public input and board signatures, and another forged document marked with the initials GRW, the late Gerald Whitaker. Except Gerald had died in 2016. The real twist: the signature was digitally manipulated. Meredith's team ran a forensic analysis and found it was a copy-paste job from a scanned deed in the county archives, dropped into a new document with blurred edges. I knew what that meant. Someone inside the recorder's office had greenlit the forgery, maybe even helped craft it. That evening, I drove down to the county building in Glenview. It was a sterile tan brick fortress with buzzing fluorescent lights and dusty ficus trees in every hallway. I walked into the land records office with a portable scanner, a thermos of burnt gas station coffee, and my drone bag slung over my shoulder. "Just reviewing some property filings," I said to the clerk. The man behind the counter nodded lazily. He wore a badge that said, "Rawlins. Guy Rawlins." He didn't recognize me, but I recognized his signature. It was on the April forms. I played dumb, asked to review the full approval packet on file for parcel 83A. Which was my land. He tapped at the keyboard, squinted at the screen, and handed me a printout. "Here you go, everything public." I thanked him, walked to a bench, and scanned every page into my tablet. Rawlins kept glancing over. I kept a calm face. On the last page, I found it. An internal memo dated April 12th with the subject line, "Expedited HOA Adjustment, Aspen Trail Heights." It had 2 signatures, Karen's and Rawlins. That was enough. I left the building, sent the files to Meredith, and by morning, she'd filed a federal complaint for registry fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The marshals issued a warrant for Rawlins. He didn't come in to work that day. 3 days later, they found him at a casino across the state line, trying to withdraw $10,000 in cash and board a shuttle to Vegas. He was arrested with 2 prepaid phones, 7 burner IDs, and a copy of my land plat with red circles around access trails. Now it was a full-blown criminal conspiracy. In the meantime, the HOA's remaining board tried damage control. They released a pathetic statement calling Karen's actions independent and unauthorized. But too many signatures matched, too many payments had been issued, and too many of them had emails CCing the board. I forwarded them all. By the end of the week, 3 more board members were under investigation. The HOA's insurance provider dropped them, and the injunction dismissed by the judge in less than 10 minutes. "The plaintiff cannot demand access to land they do not legally own," he said flatly, especially when that access was claimed using fraudulent documentation. The courtroom was half full, press, HOA members, even a couple neighbors from the next ridge over. When it was done, I shook the judge's hand and walked out through the crowd like a man leaving a burning house with the deed in his pocket. They tried to erase my lines on the map. Instead, they lit up every camera in the state. I was up early on Friday. The air was sharp and blue, crisp like only mountain air gets before the sun heats the stones. The birds were louder than usual, or maybe I was just jumpy. I checked my cameras. Everything looked calm. No movement at the gates, no vans, no HOA jackets. For the first time in a week, I let myself breathe. Then, just after 8 in the morning, a notification flashed across my satellite terminal. Motion detected, gate cam, one large vehicle. I tapped the feed, a charter bus, then another. Then 4 more behind them, pulling up in a staggered formation like a field trip caravan. Some had decals that read, Aspen Trail Heights Community Outing. I counted at least 6 full buses, idling on the road below my gate, people beginning to unload. I blinked twice. Was this a joke? The first wave of bodies came fast, some carrying coolers, others folding tables. A group in matching shirts unlatched crates of catering equipment. 2 men with a giant pop-up tent began assembling it right outside the gate. A third man wearing a vest marked HOA Logistics approached the keypad with a clipboard in hand. I grabbed the megaphone. Step away from the property. This is private land under federal protection. You are trespassing. They ignored me. In fact, they waved. One woman shouted back, "We were told it was cleared." I didn't wait. I pulled out my phone and hit the emergency call. I had the federal marshal's direct line, and they picked up on the first ring. "They're here," I said. Buses, equipment. At least 70 people trying to set up some kind of community event on my property. I could hear the marshals shouting to someone in the background. "We're dispatching now. Do not engage directly. Stay safe. Lock the cabin." I didn't lock anything. I was already halfway down the trail. By the time I got to the gate, a crowd had gathered just inside the fence. Someone had cut the chain again. My private property, trespassers will be prosecuted sign had been taken down and stuffed into a pile of firewood. 2 men in polo shirts were fiddling with my generator. I shouted. No one listened. They were walking around like it was their backyard wedding. A group of teenagers wandered past me toward the tree line, laughing. Another woman snapped photos of the cabin, muttering about rustic charm. A man leaned inside my shed. A couple entered the cabin. Entered. I froze. My blood went cold. I sprinted. The door was open. Dirty footprints on the floor. The smell of cinnamon and bleach. Someone had brought an air freshener. 2 women were in my kitchen unpacking plastic trays of muffins and orange juice. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my home?" I barked. They looked up, confused. One of them blinked, then smiled. "Oh, are you the caretaker? We were told it needed airing out before the guests arrive." I just pointed to the door. "Out! Now!" Behind me, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone had gone upstairs. I grabbed the radio. "Sheriff, marshals, anyone. People are inside my house." "Repeat, inside." They're walking through the bedrooms. One of them shouted down, "This master suite is gorgeous." I think that's when I lost my patience. I stepped outside, yanked the generator switch to kill the power, then marched into the middle of the yard and lit a road flare. The smoke hissed red. "This is private land. Get out now or face federal trespassing charges." That got their attention. People started yelling. Some ran back toward the buses. A man in a chef's coat dropped a tray of deviled eggs. The generator guys bolted. A woman screamed as the power cut, and the stereo playing classical music died mid-violin. Just then, sirens. 3 cruisers, 1 federal SUV. I could have wept. The officer stepped out in full gear. 2 marshals moved quickly, not wasting a second. They pointed at the buses and shouted orders. "Everyone off the property. Move to the road. This is a federal seizure of illegally occupied land." People scrambled. Someone tried to argue, waving a paper. One marshal snatched it and said calmly, "This is a printed HOA newsletter, not a legal permit." It took 15 minutes to clear them all out. When they finally left, the yard was trashed. Muffins, shoes, decorations, broken tent poles, and a ceramic coffee dispenser with a crack down the middle. Inside, the cabin had been ransacked, not looted, just violated. Every drawer opened, my backup radio gone, clothes rummaged. A framed photo of my dad face down on the stairs. I stood there, hands shaking, but the camera feeds had caught every second. By nightfall, the files were in evidence. By the next morning, arrest warrants had been issued for 6 individuals, including the HOA event coordinator who had orchestrated the entire thing under the guise of a charity community picnic. This wasn't negligence, it was escalation. And I was done playing nice. They gave me 1 night to breathe. 1. The day after the invasion, I was sitting on the porch with a shotgun across my knees, sipping black coffee and watching the dawn settle like mist on the ridge. The yard still looked like a battlefield. Crushed cups, shredded flyers, one abandoned high heel. I hadn't even picked up the shattered pieces of the coffee dispenser. It felt symbolic. That morning, Meredith called. "It's time," she said. "Court hearing at 11. Full criminal review. They want you present." I didn't hesitate. I loaded the hard drives into a Pelican case, grabbed the printed map overlays, and headed down the mountain in my truck. I wasn't in uniform, but I may as well have been armed with an arsenal: evidence, video logs, legal filings, and the most important weapon of all, truth. Court was held in the Glenview District Courthouse, a squat concrete block with flickering fluorescent lights and peeling flags. Inside, Karen sat in the defendant's box in a muted beige jumpsuit, flanked by two federal marshals. Her hair looked less perfect now. Her hands were cuffed in front of her. When she saw me, her face tightened. Not shame, just pure venom. I sat with Meredith and the prosecutors. The judge, a sharp older man with glasses and a voice like cold steel, opened with a summary. Multiple charges including forgery, trespassing, conspiracy to defraud, abuse of registry access, and unlawful seizure of private property. Then the video started playing. The gate at 4:17 a.m., the HOA Jeep, the clipboard, the QR code, cut to the court filings, the fake signature from a man who'd been dead 9 years, cut to the buses, the unauthorized entry, the camera showing the muffin trays inside my kitchen, the shot of a woman putting her feet on my couch and laughing, "I could live here." Then the clincher, Rollins being dragged through the casino lobby in cuffs, trying to explain away a GPS-stamped copy of my property lines. Karen broke. She screamed that she'd been misled by her legal team, that the community expected leadership, and that Silas never used the property anyway. It was just sitting there. I stood when the judge called me. "Mr. Morgan, do you have anything to add?" I stepped forward and opened my folder. "Just one thing, Your Honor." I pulled out the original land deed, the surveyor's map with federal seals, and the 2018 court ruling affirming my land's exemption from HOA jurisdiction. I laid them down one by one. This land has been mine, fair and legal, for almost a decade. I built that cabin myself. I dug that well, planted those trees, installed every gate and alarm by hand. I've lived in silence, without bothering a soul, until these people tried to turn my life into a rental brochure. The courtroom was quiet. The judge nodded. It took 15 minutes. Karen was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, illegal land seizure, and harassment. Rollins got 12. 3 other board members were indicted on lesser charges, but banned from serving on any corporate board again. The HOA itself was dissolved by judicial order. Its assets, funds, properties, even the fancy clubhouse, were liquidated to pay damages. I was awarded $3.8 million, covering property damage, personal trauma, legal costs, and restitution for intrusion. I didn't smile. I didn't even speak. I just walked out the courthouse doors with my boots echoing across the tile. It was over. 3 months later, I returned to the cabin. The new gate was reinforced steel. The perimeter now had buried motion sensors, infrared cameras, and auto-locking gates tied to satellite control. I had a private contractor install a drone perch and a direct uplink to a cloud archive. I stepped out of the truck, breathed in the pine. The porch was fixed, the house repainted, the generator silent and solid. I uncorked a bottle of whiskey, poured 2 fingers into a tin cup, and walked up to the new sign by the gate. Black letters on a bronze plate, laser etched. "You can only reserve this place through a court order. And only if you're not Karen. Cheers."